Hello, everybody. A very warm welcome to another one of our Centre for Animal Welfare webinars with a very exciting guest lecturer for you today. My name is Andrew Knight. I'm the Director of the Centre for Animal Welfare at the University of Winchester. The centre is one of the university's most active research and knowledge exchange centres. We have an undergraduate degree in Animal Welfare and Society, a very successful distance learning master's degree in Animal Welfare Science, Ethics and Law, and we're exciting to be putting on another degree this year as well in Animal Welfare and Conservation. We consist of around about 10 full-time and part-time academic staff at the university and 4 international visiting professors, some of who are world leaders in their fields. And we think it's really important to not just be on some kind of academic ivory tower researching and publishing academically, although we do a lot of that. We think it's really important to actually try to engage with the wider society as well to try to make a positive difference for animals. And as part of that, we do a lot of external presenting and engaging with different stakeholder groups. As part of this process of engagement, we're very keen to occasionally host leading guest speakers in the field of animal welfare. I'm very excited to be able to bring to you today Dr. Luke Gamble. Dr. Luke Gamble has been a vet since 1999. He's the founder and chief executive of the international animal charities, Worldwide Veterinary Services and Mission Rabies. He's got a high media profile. He's actually a TV star of Sky One's Vet Adventures. He's featured on Animal Planet and in National Geographic. He is quite an adventurous soul. I've been very interested to hear about his adventures in developing nations and other exciting places around the world as he seeks to advance the welfare of animals. He's an entrepreneur, an author, and much, much more. And he deals with animals as diverse as rhinoceroses and, of course, the dogs that he deals with in trying to decrease rabies in developing nations. His projects are as ambitious as they are fun, and he feels that no vision is too small, and with the right team, anything is possible. His aim is to help as many people and also animals as possible as he can during his career. And his passion is the extracurricular work that he does with the charities that he founded, Worldwide Veterinary Services, that send veterinary teams to disaster regions around the world, and also Mission Rabies, through which he and his colleagues work to try to stamp out rabies. So I'm going to hand over to Luke shortly. So Luke, if you could go ahead and share your presentation for us, that would be great. As Luke presents, you'll be able to send in questions if you've got any via the chat column. We will take some of those at the end of the talk in about 45 minutes. And I'd finally like to just mention that this will also be recorded as well. So we will bring Luke up and hand over to you now, Luke. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Andrew, and hello, everyone. Great of you to spend your lunch listening to me. The good thing about remote talks is that if it drags on a bit, you can just surf something else or slip off. And so if you see my eyes kind of glaze over, I've clearly bored myself, and I'll need a nudge from someone to get back on track. So let's have a good chat about WVS and Mission Rabies, and let's focus on the fun and adventure rather than anything else for the next sort of 45 minutes or so. These are some of the things I've been doing, just to give you a flavour.
Firm ground. Oh, we made it.
I'm now trying to master these moves to encourage this little one to go to the toilet, hopefully not in my hand.
I just got absolutely splattered in anal gland. She's got a tiny little baby rhino calf.
I've got to make an incision almost the entire length of the dog. It's pretty much as big a surgery as it gets.
Quick, come here, come here.
If I just climb through this window, here. Where's the twig when you want one?
Hey,
Naughty monkey, come on, out the way.
This is Animal Cop Zambia.
This is fundamentally wrong. Wouldn't fancy that under your skin, would you?
what I love about this is health and safety. We've now got to get these off. bring all your diseased and sick animals to the Mzungus.
You can see how bloated it is. Let's just have a look, see if we're a threat. Hopefully it'll decide we're not. It'll be fine. Oh, it's lovely.
So that was all a bit of a while ago, actually, but it's brilliant fun. And as Andrew very kindly just said in his intro, I graduated as a vet in '99 from Bristol University. I worked in mixed practice in Taunton, then I worked at the Donkey Sanctuary, then I did a clinical scholarship in large animal surgery at Cambridge University. Then I locumed for a bit and I ended up setting up my own mixed practice in the New Forest, Pilgrim's Veterinary Practice, and really evolved the charities alongside that. So the fun of being a vet has been something that's been with me since the age of about 10 when I wanted to start doing it, and it was a real focus of my life and my career. And I've been really lucky because I've been able to have all sorts of different adventures, working with lots of different types of animals. That's my best Tintin impression there in Laos, and it's just been really fun. You know, it's a great career. And champion animal welfare is really what it's been all about for me, just trying to drive that on. So why did I get into charity stuff rather than just doing normal practice? Well, really in my first job, when you graduate as a vet, you sort of go out there thinking it's all about fixing animals and it's the kid's idealistic dream. And of course, the truth is life isn't really quite like that. It's a lot of economics, a lot of business. There's a lot of balances and compromise with what you want to do, and just things aren't always black and white. There's a huge amount of grey. And in my first job, I had the opportunity to go to Samos with a friend, Clive, who's in this picture here, and help at a dog shelter. And it was really just a week holiday. It was just in Samos on the island, and we went over there to help a little charity. And they had a lot of dogs in a pound at the top of a mountain next to a rubbish dump. It's fairly gritty stuff. There were no real vets helping there, and the shelter was in trouble. Animal Care Samos, it was called at the time, and they really put an advert out for a bit of help. So we piled over there and we thought, oh, we'll give them a hand. And it was a really amazing, eye-opening experience because it was really the opportunity to kind of be a vet and practice doing something I loved without any economic constraints. And what we did is we brought in a picnic table from outside and we started trying to neuter the dogs. And it was my first exposure to situations like seeing really different kinds of cruelty. So this, for example, this dog here, you can see its ears have been cut off with a pair of scissors. It's used as a guard dog just to make it a little bit scarier. And I got exposure to incidences like puppies being abandoned everywhere, or dogs with a disease called leishmaniasis, which is carried by sandflies, and lots and lots of stray cats. And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with those populations that are exploding on islands where there's a real lack of veterinary resource? And there were also dilemmas. There were dilemmas that never really have to face in normal practice. So this beautiful dog here had a big puppy of litters, but it was a crowded animal shelter where dogs were literally just being dumped over a fence at night, or you'd turn up in the morning and they were just bound, tied up outside. And of course, the puppies would get out of the pounds or the kennels and they get attacked by the other dogs, and disease might get into that shelter. And it was a real ethical tightrope to know the best for the animals, all of the animals in that shelter in the pound, and not just the individuals. And how do you manage that? How do you control that disease? And do you have to make some very difficult decisions as to what you might have to do with the puppies and kittens? And of course, as a young vet, that's a real eye-opener. And I remember getting on the plane and flying back, just thinking, wow, you know, this is a whole nother realm of veterinary practice I hadn't actually considered. What on earth can we do to help? And the people I've been working with, I found the people volunteering and helping out the shelter, none of them were vets. They just wanted to champion animals. I found them really inspiring. I found them really fun, a little bit crazy, of course, but I found them fun and engaging, and I wanted to do more. And I'd love to say that it was all about that altruistic drive, but in all honesty, it was a really cheap way to get around and see the world. So I could spend my holidays, head off with a friend somewhere, and we could go and stay in a dog shelter, very cheap places to stay, do something we love doing, help the animals, see the place, have an adventure, and then come back to the reality and the day job and doing what I did as a vet. One thing led to another, and I'd set up this charity called Worldwide Veterinary Service, very grand sounding name, really to facilitate getting drugs and medicines, equipment, and heading over and supporting little charities and NGOs that needed help. And we got an email through from an American tourist that had actually been in India, in a place called Coonoor, which is in Tamil Nadu in the south of India. And they had this American tourist had seen a big pile of dead dogs by the side of the road, and it had really troubled her. And she was emailing Worldwide Veterinary Service, this grand sounding charity, which was actually, you know, just the computer at the back of my garage at the time. Could we help stop this culling, this inhumane culling of all the dogs? And she was just shocked by the whole thing. Now, the reason why there were a pile of dead dogs there was because a lady had been walking past this slum and she was attacked by a pack of stray dogs, and they came out the slum, they bit her really badly, and she was hospitalized for actually 3 months, the poor lady. She made a good recovery, but obviously very traumatic, and it turned out her husband owned the local hospital, so he was a very important man, and the municipality had to do something about that. And what they did with the public outcry that had resulted of her being attacked is they said, look, we're gonna cull the dogs, we're gonna stop this menace and this danger to people, because they hurt this poor lady, but they could obviously kill a child or something who's walking on that road. And so what they did is they said, we're going to pay per tail of dog, so we're going to clear them out. And of course, teams of catchers and cull teams went out to try and get as many dogs as they could, get the tails and get the money for doing it. And there was a huge public outcry. It was awful, because of course the dogs that these people could actually catch, they weren't the scary, nasty dogs. They were the friendly dogs. They were just any dogs they could get, and it wasn't working. And we teamed up with a local charity there called IPAN, and we went over there and we worked with IPAN, me and Clive again, and we neutered about 70 dogs in 2 days, just in this sort of vet hospital kind of clinic area they had on the outskirts of that slum. And all the newspaper came down, a little TV crew came down, and there was a big frolic because we were vaccinating dogs and sterilizing them, and we're saying, look, if these dogs, they can't give you rabies, they can't cause any problems, we can control the population. And the municipality, as a result of this, and because of the big public support in the local area for what we were doing, they stopped the cull program. And that was the absolute first moment for me where I thought, hang about, this stuff can actually make a difference, you know. And then what was brilliant is there was this sustainability ongoing where IPAN and teams could go back, we could keep neutering the dogs with all the full permissions and support of the local government, and that would get the population under control. And it did make a massive difference to the dogs and the people in that area. And it was really uplifting. And I had one other very exciting incident there. And I love this story because you know, stick with me forever. Is IPAN, the actual headquarters, was in a very rural village. And just as we got back to that village, a call came in and said, look, there's a dog's been bitten by a cobra, and it's dying, it's intolerable, it's getting a gangrenous wound. And Clive went off to try and help that. And another call came in saying there's a cow has broken its leg, and can someone just come out and help? And I went to sort that out. So I was dropped off with this family in this little village to try and help a cow with what I thought was a broken leg. And nobody there spoke any English. And I was just there thinking, oh, goodness me, what am I going to do with this? And Indian cows are quite small, but they're also sacred. So it was a big deal. And the family around, they had about 4 cows, this family. And this was, you know, they clearly loved this cow. They were all there. And I looked at the cow, and the cow clearly was pregnant. And I did a little examination on it, and it was heavily pregnant. I thought, my goodness me, you know, maybe we can get it at least carved down if I could support the leg and give it some pain relief. And so we got out, we got some bamboo and chopped that down and splintered up the leg. I've got everyone around sort of trying to mime it, and we lifted the cow up, and it turned out he had 2 broken legs. And it was a great lesson to always do a full clinical examination on an animal, actually, before you treat it. But obviously I felt spectacularly stupid because I just wasted about an hour just trying to strap this one leg up. The cow obviously had 2 broken legs. They weren't going to kill the cow. They couldn't do that. It's a big sort of religious aspect there. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll buy the cow off them. And I bought the cow. It cost me £10. I don't think it was a massive bargain for a cow with 2 broken legs, but I bought the cow for £10. And Nigel from IPAN came back with the truck, and we sedated the cow and lifted it into the truck. and then drove it, because they're not that big, Indian cows, and we drove it about 2 kilometers to where the headquarters of IPAM was in this little village. And we basically shot the cow, but I cut it open and did what's called a bush Caesar, and pulled the calf out. And the calf, which for some unknown reason decided to call it Megan, we looked after it about 3-4 days, got it strong enough, and then gave it back to the family. And then I actually went back to India. It was a few years ago now, but it's 8 years after that incident, and Megan was now a cow, and she'd had several calves herself, and the family all remembered it, and it was just incredible sort of experience. And I was absolutely determined after that sort of big India trip that WS was going to win. And that was the moment. So we set this up, and the goal of WS was to provide volunteer teams, non-profit organisations, animal charities, and support them with veterinary support, to give drugs and equipment, short-dated drugs that might not be able to be sold in the UK, but still in date, that we can send out, equipment we can source and provide to charities on the front line of animal welfare, to provide free advice. Sorry, all my dogs are in the office with me. This is the thing about these, so they're going to kick off if anyone walks past outside. And veterinary training, and the veterinary training has become a massive part of what we're doing now with WVS. We're based in Cranbourne, not a million miles away from Winchester, which is great. And that's the team upstairs. Obviously, there's absolutely nobody upstairs at the moment. Well, Fred's coming in and out, but pretty empty at the moment, so a bit quiet here right now. But to give you an idea of the scale and size of what we do, in the last 5 years, we've sent about 400 vet teams out and treated 500,000 animals. We send lots and lots of vet supplies and equipment out, dispatching parcels, and the training, which I'll get a little bit more into later on, supporting vets to boost core infrastructure in the countries where they can really sort of make most impact. The components of our work are broken down into these 4 broad categories. So we do veterinary aid, care and protection of animals, veterinary training, education, and Mission Rabies. And I'm now going to whisper on a little bit about each of these to give you a full flavour of what we're doing and how that works. So veterinary aid, what's all this about? Pretty much what it says on the can. We send parcels and we send emergency teams. So the parcels, I wear shorts all the time, and it isn't I just wanted to be a postman, but it's that I really, really believe that just providing resources can make a big impact. And I get emails, and the team here get emails like this all the time. This is Turkey from a dog shelter in Sri Lanka, and we just got this email through by a charity there saying, look, we've got a problem with 200 dogs in the shelter and losing all their hair, and they're in the right state. Is there anything you can do to help? And it took about half an hour to put together a box of medicines that would treat this. This is mange for all the dogs. And 3 months later, we got this picture saying those meds you sent were amazing, and they've helped all the dogs here. And it was incredible because that cost about £12. It took 30 minutes, and we could just send out the boxes of stuff, and it made a massive difference to those animals. So parcels come in from wholesalers and from veterinary practices around the UK. They come here at the back of Pilgrim's Vet Practice in Cranbourne. We log everything, record all its batch numbers, its expiry dates. There's lots of rules about this kind of thing, and we get everything there archived, and then we send it out and dispatch it all over the world with books and suture materials, and they go out and they go to help lots of different charities everywhere. And the goal is that we're trying to send 6 parcels out every day. And the idea is a minimum of 1,000 parcels a year. With the drugs themselves, we have to take out, we have to sort of take them out of the packets and things so they can't be resold. And it has to be very carefully done. But it makes a wonderful impact. And we're sort of very proud of how that's built up. And then with the emergency teams, this is disaster emergency response stuff. And really, I went on a trip in 2008 to Kenya to work in the refugee camps, the IDP camps there, and it was a real eye-opener that whilst you get these tragic zones of humanitarian crisis, there is a role for vets where we can support in the background, helping people that really depend on animals for their livelihood. And it was really a wonderful sort of thing. And after that, we sort of built up this component. So we don't do a huge amount of it. It's expensive and logistically challenging, but we're trying to get more and more into it just to support in the most proactive way we can. I went to Cairo 4 days after the revolution because obviously, a lot of people left Cairo very rapidly, and they dumped all the dogs. And this dog shelter had a capacity for 180 dogs. It actually had 600 dogs in it. So they really needed some help, and we were able to send teams every couple of months for a year, just trying to help them get back on track and give them veterinary support to really look after those animals. And then Mayu went to Nepal after the earthquake and helped there. And then Fran did a big project in Mozambique. And this has now led to another big project in Mozambique. There's only 6 vets in the whole of Mozambique doing large animal stuff. And Mozambique's regularly hit with droughts and floods, and it really has a tough time of it. So we've actually raised enough money now to kit out a mobile veterinary hospital linked in with the university. It does outreach projects up north, trying to support in proactive ways to train up local teams. And the idea of WVS is we send an emergency team. Really, we're trying to get to it every 6 months where they can go out and do projects, and they shouldn't just be about the instant bang. They've got to have some sustainability and boosting core infrastructure so they can really make a difference over a longer period of time. And that really all hinges on the training. With care and protection of animals, again, this is all outreach, a lot of outreach work, a lot of One Health stuff, which is the new buzzword. Everyone will know about this with COVID, the wildlife stuff we're doing, sterilizations, work in equines. And we are trying in normal times, we're trying to get to sending a team out a month of vets, vet nurses and non-vets who go out on these projects and support. And these projects range from sort of community stuff. That one there on the right is moving plastic from a cow. It's 14 kilos of plastic out that cow. And the cows, they browse the sort of streets of India, and they love the oil on the packets, and they eat all those packets, and then they get a build-up in their rumen, and it stops all their digestion. They get very bloated, and it's a pretty sort of sad demise for them. So doing a rumenotomy and then training up the local vets on that aspect, and then trying to keep the cows away from the rubbish and trying to get a sort of system in place to protect the animals from getting hold of that rubbish is the key. And then remote outreach, these are the sort of really exciting ones where you just sort of head out where there's absolutely kind of no vet aid and you're trying to support. And then with the wildlife stuff, and it was great to hear Andrew mention the new degree you're going to be doing at Winchester now as well with the conservation links. Hopefully some good tie-ins there. We're starting to really get into the wildlife stuff, not in a huge level, but certainly we were trying to stop this project here, for example, is in Armenia, and we were actually trying to stop the dog culling on the streets of Yerevan in Armenia. And it's an epic story, this, but we had a team on the ground trying to help the dogs, and then this picture was in the Daily Mail saying it's the world's saddest zoo, and it turns out that sort of gangster had this nightclub and a little kind of zoo in the middle of it, and then ended up owing lots of people money and left, and essentially had left all the animals there, and these lions in these horrible little pens. Awful. And we were the only sort of team there. We ended up getting involved in that, trying to help get the animals out, and James from Pilgrims went over there and we got those lions out. You can see it's a lion sort of tripled in size fairly quickly, and it was just very rewarding to be able to do that and try and improve the moral perception towards animal welfare and these kind of creatures. And it's tough, and in a lot of countries like that, for example, they're kept really for show and status. So it's desperately important to do something about that and try and raise awareness. This is the kite festivals in northern India, which we try and support each year. There's vet teams led very much by an Indian charity, an Indian team over there who are wonderful at this, but they line the kite strings for the battles with glass, and they have these sort of wars with the kites, which is a very visually spectacular thing, but a lot of birds get caught up in that and get injured as a result. So there's vet teams on the ground there. And then now we've got a clinic, the BSPCA in Blantyre in southern Malawi, where we do a big rabies project. We actually run a BSPCA, which is like a little hospital to support all the animals in Blantyre city, mainly the dogs and cats, but we've now started to support the local national park, Majeti, who have a huge problem with traffic wildlife. This is a pangolin, and in fact, in this pangolin, the weight of pangolin scales is more than the equivalent weight in gold at the moment, and they're horribly trafficked and abused. But we're getting involved in that, and that's Dagmar there trying to help with the collaring of the lions on the park and fitting a transponder to it. She's catheterizing pangolin there. Guys, stop. Now's not the time. And then we get these sort of emails. This was one last week. It's another zoo in Eastern Europe. Can we help, and this kind of thing. So we're trying to rapidly get into that and seeing how we can practically and pragmatically help to turn things around and support. But obviously it stirs the emotions, this sort of stuff, and it goes on all over the world. And it's important that we kind of shout about that awareness, and we try and do something about it in a proactive and positive way. I hate this kind of thing. You must have all seen this, where they chain the lions up and they half drug them, and tourists get to go in and stroke them and walk by them. It's just awful, and it's so common in so many countries. And moving on to the One Mission work. One Mission is One Health. This is these two sweet little kids here. Again, this is a rural village in Malawi, and they're holding that goat. But if you look at the hair, you can see that both these lads, they've got a mange themselves. They both have pot bellies from worm burns. They didn't have any shoes, so they're very prone to getting hookworm. That little goat sleeps in the hut with those guys, and the goat was actually hooching in fleas. So One Mission's about trying to improve the husbandry and how we can support poor families, support the welfare of the animals, but also support the communities in a really proactive way. And that actually is a big sort of context of the direction we want to move forward with WVS. And then the equine projects. Really, I love donkeys, always loved donkeys. So we're really trying to get into the donkey welfare. This actually is donkey in southern India. And you can see there, and I'm sorry if some of these stories are a bit sad, but the good news is this is actually ends up as a happy story. These donkeys were used to carry sand from a river up to a road. And the community, these communities are really, really poor, desperately, desperately poor. And what they did is they had this sort of traditional belief. They sliced the nostrils of the donkeys. You can just about see it there, to help airflow. And if they get lame, they branded them, and they often chop off, you see the tips of its ears. That's a sort of another cultural thing they do. Really sad. So the idea was we set up a vet clinic there. We did whole educational program, and actually they've stopped the practice now, slicing the nostrils, which is really, really great. And it's all about trying to champion that, raise moral perception. People aren't inherently cruel. It's just often all about kind of educating and supporting in a really proactive way. And now this one is a really exciting project we're trying to get going. This is in the Danakil Depression in Ethiopia. It's one of the harshest places in the world, but it gives you an idea about how we set up these projects. So there's these salt mines, and it's a really big industry, and people trek in there to carve out little blocks of salt, and then they come back carrying all the salt, and they sell it on. But it's an epic trek, and there's no veterinary support or provision. Now, the situation is that, of course, the donkeys trek in there, 100 donkeys go in, they walk over 50 miles in extreme heat. I mean, it is the hottest place on earth, so it's pretty hardcore. They're absolutely laden down with all these bricks of salt when they come back, and they suffer terribly. And what we thought we'd do is we get in there and we set up a little vet clinic on the edge of where they go into Danakil Depression. And we'd be able to support the animals going in and the communities. And obviously, if the donkeys and camels are looked after, they'll work harder. We can help their welfare, but also the welfare of the people having to do that. The mistake we made was thinking that the people going in with the donkeys and the camels to the salt mines actually own those donkeys and camels. And this is the other thing about these projects. We always think it's black and white. It's never black and white. What they actually do is they rent the donkeys and camels off richer people, richer farmers, and they rent them and then go in and out. And if one dies, then they're not too worried, because they'll just rent another, and they're never going to pay for vet treatment. And it's how do we change that? How do we make that impact? So it's really understanding simple things we can do to promote that aren't going to cost these people particularly money, but will improve the welfare of the animals and will improve sort of the working conditions throughout. And there's some obviously really, really simple things we can do. So we look at the main drivers of poor welfare in those situations: lack of water, food, shelter, lack of vet facilities, lack of interest in the donkey welfare from this rental system, and the lack of knowledge and skills. Any area we can do that will have a massive welfare impact. And what do we do about it? So the plan there is we set up a mobile clinic. We're going to link in with the local university. We're going to try and get all of those vets trained up in this, supporting, get it as a bit of a program for them to get down there from Michele to support on this area. We're going to focus directly where it's needed in sort of simple ways. And stuff like getting a water trough, for example, making sure that can be provisioned with the water supply. You know, it's not rocket science, but it can be done. And so we're doing all this kind of work. It's very easy to say it. And of course, the other thing with this particular project is, of course, big war in Ethiopia just before Christmas, and we've had to pull the team out. So we take a back seat, and once that settles down, we'll get back in there and we'll crack on with it. But it's all about then measuring the impact. It's scientifically and objectively showcasing what we've done, why we've done it, how we've affected change, if we've affected enough change, if we haven't affected any change, how can we make that better? And then how can we ensure it's sustainable? And it's all about, you know, from the simple stuff like numbers of animals we can actually help, but really it's about trying to boost the moral perception to that animal welfare, you know, shifting that sort of human attitude as well to support in a proactive and pragmatic way, and demonstrate the effectiveness of the team. So the Marshig Trust are the main supporters of that, and they funded a lot of that project. So we call it a WS Marshig team, and very grateful for them for believing in this. And then the veterinary training and education. So this is a big one, and essentially,
Welcome to WVS Thailand, and this is the Jan Marshig International Training Centre. We're so proud to be part of this incredible team here that have not only helped tens of thousands of dogs in the city and the community, but they also train vets from all over the world, and we run outreach programs to communities and rural areas that have no access to any other form of veterinary help.
My name is Fun. I'm the head nurse of WVS Thailand. I'm running outreach program. So we are going to the area that's like no vet clinic. So we will bring our team there and taking care of the animals there. The community is very happy. They respond to our call. Some people come in to ask for wound cases, tick, fleas, skin problem. I feel great to see the animal healthy. Feel great to see the owner is happy and very grateful to have you here, and you make difference for their pet.
So we've had an incredible 3 years, helping more than 10,000 dogs in the local area. What we still come across are awful cases like this. What we do is very slowly and very gently, we nurse this dog back by feeding slowly, medicating, and giving all of the love, attention and care that the dog really needs.
Moving! My name is U. I'm in charge of the shelter. This is moving. This is a big day for her because she's been here for like 10 weeks. We will transfer her to the owners. Here is the lady, and she can go back to where she used to be. You know, when the dog gets to see someone like they love again, it's like really a big happiness. The shelter dog is like 76 dogs here, which like available for adoptions. And last year we have like 44 adopted.
I'm Guy. I'm taking care of rescue and rehabilitation. This is a classic rescue case. We got a case like this every day. We got some lady that taking care of a street dog in the market, and not far from here. She called us to let us know about this dog that he got a bleeding.
If you want to donate, then please dig deep and we'll make it count. WVS, let's be the difference.
So essentially, we've got some cracking ITCs, international training centres, and they're not just animal shelters or anything like that. They're canine rescue rehabilitation centres is how we term them, because shelters can just be prisons for animals, frankly. So it's all about getting injured animals in, fixing them up, and then neutering them, vaccinating them, and then often they do actually much better back on the street from where they come from, because they really hate the captivity as well. They're street animals, many of these. So it's and the communities as well, whilst they'll often say in these places they're stray animals, actually many of them are kind of semi-owned or fed by lots of people and quite well liked in many of these places. And what we try and do with the ITCs is make the whole focus all about training. So we get vets in, and we've got the hubs. We've got 2 in India, 1 in Thailand, 1 in Malawi, and 1 in Galapagos now. And those are our ITC centres around the world. And that video there, which sorry, just jumped slightly out of order because I'm messing around with the presentation, but that was obviously about our Thailand one. And
Luke, just to jump in a second, say very sorry, but we mostly couldn't see the video. It froze part way through. We could hear the audio, so I think we got a good idea of what was going on, but just to let you know. And
that's why you said, please send me the videos so we can play them from your end. And now we know that was absolutely the right thing to do. So sorry for that, everyone. But the
if there is anything really important, then of course we can play from this end. Let us know in that case.
Yeah. Jump in if any of the others don't play, just jump in. We'll just stop it. It's absolutely fine. Aim to practically train 700 vets a year. Obviously, we're building that up to get to 1,000 vets a year. And these are some of the rescue cases we've had from Thailand here. And I just love these sort of pictures because you see all these horribly injured dogs and then they're all happy at the end. And it's just great. And it's all because of the team on the ground. These things only win because of the people, the dedication, the focus, the energy of the characters on the ground, making them sort of deliver. And we do a lot of research at these places too into best practice. It's all got to be very practically orientated. And so sorry for the horror of this picture, but it's a transmissible venereal tumor that's very common in Africa and Asia. And the horror is why a lot of communities throw stones at dogs in these sort of areas when they come in with horrible situations like that. But obviously we can treat them and we can teach other people how to treat them. And 5 weeks and £7, and that dog's completely sorted. And it's a really lovely thing. We can bring that to these kind of places and support and help. So whilst I'm rattling on here, let's get into Mission Rabies, the final bit of what I wanted to talk to you about today. Key points about rabies. Well, things with rabies, I could just say it's a neurotropic lyssavirus that tracks up peripheral nerves and causes a fatal encephalitis. But that's a kind of horrible thing to describe anything by, and it doesn't make a huge amount of sense. The way I like to think of rabies is that it's actually the world's deadliest zoonotic disease that affects all warm-blooded mammals. 99% of all human cases are actually from dog bites, the saliva of dog bites. And there's no treatment once clinical signs manifest. It's a desperately sad disease that is the reason why hundreds of thousands of dogs, it's not just tens of thousands of dogs, are indiscriminately killed, beaten, poisoned, all over the world, because communities are terrified of rabies, and rightly so, because it causes the death of a child at least every 9 minutes. It's a horrible, horrible death, and it's massively underreported. So in many countries, the clinical signs of rabies and cerebral malaria, which are both fatal, are incredibly similar. And to actually diagnose rabies is quite an invasive thing, and in many hospitals in some poor countries actually costs money to remove a dead body from the hospital. So many sort of very sick children are taken out of hospital alive just before they pass away, and they do that for a cost-saving thing, but also so they can be buried and looked after in the villages and at home. But of course, those deaths are completely underreported, and I am going to show you now. Andrew, say if this doesn't work, I'm going to show a little video of a rabid dog so you can all see exactly what that looks like. I'm going to cut the video a bit short, but let's just see if that plays. Hang on. It's definitely not playing at the moment, but it should play now.
And it's working good.
Yeah, great. See, that dog doesn't look like some ferocious beast, does it? What it is just really unpredictable. And when they bite, they just don't let go. And they're just they're suffering terribly, these poor animals.
It even when we take this away from him, you can see he's applying real force, and you can see the pieces of sticks inside.
So you could see from that, you know, these dogs, they are absolute victims. And in fact, we picked up a puppy that was just behaving a bit strangely, and it was just nipping everyone, and no one was really too sure what was what. And we picked it up, we diagnosed it as rabies, and we tested that, and it was positive rabies. And unbelievably, it had bitten 14 people. That little puppy nipped 14 people. And obviously, we were able to track all those people. And Andrew, I think you might be unmuted. Sorry, you might be you might be unmuted.
Yes, apologies for that.
And you know, and that's really important to be able to get into that and help communities and track them down, because otherwise it would have been underreported. No one would have really done much about it. Nipped by a little puppy, well, won't worry about that. And of course, you know, if they contracted rabies, it's game over and desperately sad. So a lot of what we do is raising awareness about rabies as much as trying to vaccinate, eliminate disease. You can see here the global rabies situation, all those areas in red are where rabies is endemic. And key impact stats, so that it's often not notifiable. You know, there's no sort of law. You've got to report rabies in many countries. There's very little government investment in control programs, and it's neglected on the global stage in a very sort of significant way. So it's like, how do we deal with that? How can we help? How can we support? And the real stories. And this is a sad story, but it's one that really fires me up to do something about it. This lady's called Emma. Emma had a little boy called Joseph. Joseph was 11 years old. They lived in a village on south of Blantyre, again in rural Malawi. And Joseph had seen a dog come out the bushes and attack 2 other little boys in his village who were playing with sticks, and he got up there and he fought the dog off, but he got bitten, and so did the 2 other little boys. They knew about rabies, so they thought they'd better go to the hospital and get some post-exposure prophylaxis. So they go and get a vaccine, because if you get vaccinated quick enough after being bitten by a rabid dog, you can be okay. You need a course of vaccine. And of course, nipping to the hospital for them isn't easy. It's a 6-hour bus ride. You know, it's quite a trek. They got to the hospital, and there was no rabies vaccine. So they were told to go to a private hospital to see if they could get it there. They got to the private hospital, but the cost was very expensive. The parents of the other 2 little boys paid for it, but Emma just couldn't afford it. And it turned out the dog did have rabies. And of course, poor Joseph then contracted rabies and died. Absolutely heartbreaking beyond belief. And you might think, why on earth didn't Emma pay for it? Well, the truth is that it's 51 days average African wage to pay for that course of vaccine. 51 days of working. It's absolutely staggering. It's so expensive, and it's so hard to get in many parts of the world. And that's why it's not that it want to. I mean, what's the chances of the dog having rabies? It's not 100% certain it's going to have rabies. And then even if you get bitten by a rabid dog, you're not definitely going to get rabies. You know, but the problem is, if you do, you know, it's devastating. All these people, these are picked up in our big project in Goa. Actually, they're all bitten by rabid dogs, and they're all able to help them all. But it's because of working on these trips with WVS that I've got really into this. You know, I'm a dad. I've got 4 young kids. This is my daughter Sheba, and I remember working in a shelter in India, and a rabid dog came in, and we put the rabid dog down, but it had bitten 3 other dogs in this village. And I remember standing on the edge of the shelter, looking out these little children playing in the dirt. And I just thought, my God, you know, any of these other dogs get rabies, it's more dangerous than a tiger coming into this village. And I thought, you know, what can we do about that? And that was why Mission Rabies began, because actually trying to sort rabies out is much simpler than you may think. It's much like much like COVID. You know, it's all about vaccination, building up herd immunity. and it's vaccinating dogs, and that's really what we do. And this truck was how we launched the project. We couldn't go wrong with a 28-ton 6x6 Mercedes Zetros mobile hospital, ultimate sort of toy that. And we did a big fundraiser around this, drove it around the UK, shipped it to India, which I know sounds absolutely mad, but it's got a mobile operating theatre in the back, still working there now 8 years later tirelessly. And we launched the project, and it catapulted sort of Mission Rabies into the fore. And Mission Rabies now has plenty of project sites, which you can see there. We're really powering forward, going to areas where rabies is endemic and a huge problem. We're trying to vaccinate the dogs, and we're giving that rabies education as well. And in fact, we know rabies can be beaten up. Or this bit can be a bit dry, but this is Louis Pasteur, and he actually gave the first rabies vaccine in 1885 to this little boy. He's also called Joseph Meister. And there's a cracking story in that when Pasteur was trying to get the saliva from rabid dogs to be able to make the vaccine, he had two guys each side of him. They had the rabid dog, and they had a gun on the table, and they'd hold down the rabid dog, and Pasteur would go and get the saliva, so he had some rabies virus to be able to make the vaccine. And they had a deal, and the deal was if the dog got free and it bit anybody, whoever wasn't being attacked would pick up the gun, they'd shoot the dog, and they'd shoot the person that was bitten. I have no idea if it's true, but it's a great story. And but what is definitely true is that he went on the line, and not being a doctor, he could have gotten in a lot of trouble if it didn't work, to actually give the vaccine to Joseph and save his life. And that was the first life saved. Pasteur didn't actually make the vaccine. It was Professor Émile Roux who actually developed the vaccine. He was a colleague of Pasteur's, but Pasteur was obviously a forefront of infectious disease. He had 5 children himself who died of infectious disease, typhoid, and he really wanted to sort of make a massive impact. And amongst all the many things that Pasteur did and achieved, rabies vaccination was a big one where he could just really show it worked. But that was 1885, and look where we are now, and rabies is everywhere. And you can see the reason why it carries on is because this is 2019 in the States, but you can see 490 million was spent on giving human rabies vaccines, and only $9 million was spent on dog rabies vaccines. And what you actually want to do is you want to eliminate it in the reservoir host, which are the dogs. And our cornerstones of how we work are vaccination, education, and surveillance. So essentially, if you've got your dogs here and a rabid dog comes into the area in red, it's going to bite between 1 and 2 other animals before it dies. So the R0 of rabies is 1.2, and R0 is the rate of infectious transmission. So what we're trying to do is get in there and vaccinate a sufficient proportion of dogs, so that the statistical probability of a dog with rabies dying before it can bite or infect an unvaccinated dog is more likely than not. And that really is vaccination dynamics explained. So what we're trying to get in there is we're trying to vaccinate a sufficient proportion of dogs to have that herd immunity that breaks the transmission cycle of the virus ongoing. And scientifically, actually, if you have 40% herd immunity, it'd be great. But obviously dogs, they have a high turnover of population. More dogs move into an area and they die, and other ones come along. So what we actually do is we go in each year and we vaccinate 70% of all dogs in an area, and over a 12-month period, that herd immunity will drop. But as long as it stays above 40%, we know we've got that herd immunity, and that's what we do. And one of the big lesson we've learned with this is we've learned that doing just 70% is never enough. You've actually got to break it down. So if I did 70% of the dogs, and say all of us doing this together went to a city and we vaccinated all those dogs in yellow, we might be really pleased with ourselves for doing that. But if you look at these red squares in that population, there's some pockets there where we've not achieved the 70%. So we haven't got homogeneous coverage. And in fact, the virus will circulate in those areas. So the crux of it is to make sure you go to everywhere and you get every single region of 70%. And that is essentially what we do. And the strategies by which we do it vary. I'm going to rattle through this bit, but you can get the central point, door-to-door vaccinations, capture, vaccinate, release, or oral bait handouts. And different vaccines work different ways, and different approaches are needed in different countries. So in Africa, you might have a lot of roaming dogs, but many of them are actually owned. And if the dogs are owned, then that's great, because it means you can run a lot of static point vaccination clinics where people will bring the dogs and you can vaccinate them. Whereas if you look at, say, India, many of the roaming dogs are genuinely stray. And in those places, you've got to use your catching teams who can get out there and catch the dogs in nets. And that's what they do there. And of course, the economics of a project are vital. So any campaign any of you get involved with trying to tackle an issue you really care about, you'll find you'll get a grant. You've got to make that money stretch as far as you possibly can. So net catching teams are brilliant for getting the really stray animals, but they're quite expensive. And it only really works if they're getting enough dogs to make it cost effective. So if they get 80 dogs a day, it's brilliant. But if they only get 20 dogs a day, it becomes really, really expensive. And one big thing we've learned with our strategy is to mix up the teams. So if you have like small hand catch teams and get the sort of friendlier dogs, they're much cheaper to employ. And, you want that mix of knowing where you can send your teams to different areas and different regions to get the maximum bang for buck. And Andy here, who's on my team, has done the really smart thing of developed an app to record all this. Because how do you know if you've got 70%? Well, that's the real ticket there. You've got to mark all the dogs. So we catch the dogs in the net, we vaccinate them, we data record them, and then we know by sending in post-vaccination surveillance teams, they'll spot dogs that have got a paint mark on them and those that haven't, and they'll grid walk the various areas. And if we've got over 70%, then fantastic, we can move them to a new region. And if we've got under 70%, then of course the teams have to go back in and make sure they work until they get 70%. And this is the whole thing with modern day tech, it's just great because whilst we're doing all that, someone can be data recording, you get a whole dog population demographic. And this doesn't just have to be dogs, this can be wildlife, it can be anything you're working with. That data recording is vital because then when you present a project to anybody, it's not the people that believe in a project you've got to convince, it's the people that don't. The people that go, well, you know what, rabies, why don't we just kill all the dogs? Why on earth are you messing around vaccinating them? And the answer is, you can never kill enough dogs. You aside from the moral aspect and the way you might feel about that, the truth is you can send all the teams in, you're never going to kill enough dogs because the other dogs are going to move in that area. Dogs breed really fast, you just create a vacuum. What you've got to get in there is vaccinating those dogs and get the herd immunity. And CDC in the States have now used our app. They did a trial there in Haiti with their project and they got a 190% increase in vaccinated dogs using the app because it motivated the teams on the ground to sort of get on with it. And you can sort of see here how we work. We grid areas in a massive way and just sort of power through each year. And we've got big projects now. And this is a massive part of what I'm currently involved with, really driving these projects. The pilots in areas where we go, we refine the technique, and then we do mass application of the campaign to really drive that forward and to make sure we're getting full coverage of every area we target. And the education is the other really big bit. So we try and go 80% of schools. Because as I said, you don't always get rabies if you get bitten by a rabid dog. And if you wash the wound for 15 minutes with sort of dilute iodine, and you can get iodine anywhere, povidone, iodine, betadine, you can get it everywhere, but you'll increase your chances of not getting rabies by about 25%. So it's really worth doing. Knowing how to avoid being bitten by a dog, what rabies is, what to do if you do get bitten, are vital messages. And we've got these in various state education now. We get them in the school program. We've got them in the national curriculum in Malawi. And that's really made a big impact. And of course, the final bit of it is all about surveillance. So, it's about people know if they see a rabid dog, something happens if they call somebody. And that creates that community awareness. And we're teaming up with the government and Goa now to really make that a massive thing. So we can get dogs, we can lab test them and we record it. And then the very final bit is just improving a project. So forget rabies for the minute. It doesn't matter what project you do, you can always make it better. And this is why having volunteers, people that care, getting involved in the projects can make a massive impact because everything, it doesn't matter, your pride is complacency really. So it's all about challenging yourself and getting it better. And I remember coming back in 2017 from Blantyre, we did 34,000 dogs in 20 days. And we thought, wow, that's incredible, And someone said, well, hang about, why 20 days? Surely you could do it a bit quicker than that. But you're having a laugh, But actually, Stella from Edinburgh had done a paper to look at how far people prepared to walk to a static vaccination point. And you might think it's sort of common sense. You know, people aren't going to trek miles and miles to a vaccine clinic with a dog on a lead. They don't have leads for a start. So how far are they actually going to go? And it turns out about 500 meters is sort of you sort of, you know, where you need to put them. And what we did in actual fact is we took that on board, and so we increased our static points to 77 rather than 44 in the city, and we ended up doing more dogs in 12 days, and it was cheaper. And it was a great lesson. Always power on, you know, always keep improving. And the current results, for example, are one in Goa, no human rabies deaths in the last 3 years. It's all really about the human cases, but the science is all about the canine cases. And you can see there, they've all come down, which is really, really great. And that's what we're after with all of it. And the other lovely one is the reason we went into Blantyre is because in 2012, The Lancet did an editorial saying the highest incidence of child rabies deaths from any single institution in the whole of Africa was in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Blantyre, Malawi. Got a grant from Dogs Trust. MSD provided the vaccines. We went in there, and we've run that project every year. And in 2018, they did another article in the Lancet editorial, and they said now they have one of the lowest incidents, all because of the project, which was really
Luke, you just dropped out for a sec there, but I think we got most of that.
Okay, great. Because it'd be very dry for me to witter on about that again. Look, I'm going to finish now with just this little video. Andrew, jump in if you can't see it, but this summarises the rabies.
When was the last time you talked about the world's deadliest disease? A disease so dangerous that even when symptoms first start to show, it's already too late. Death is inevitable. A disease that kills a child every 9 minutes, many of whom live in some of the poorest and most isolated communities in the world. A disease that leads to agony, persecution, and death for hundreds of thousands of dogs worldwide. This disease is rabies, and it's one of only a handful of neglected tropical diseases as categorized by the World Health Organization. So amidst all this pain, suffering, and death, rabies remains neglected, and the world stays silent. But here's the thing. Rabies can be defeated. We have the solution and a pledge from the World Health Organization to eliminate human rabies deaths by 2030. We simply need the world to be aware that this is something we can achieve, and we can achieve it together. If we act now, our generation can be the one to eliminate rabies for good. So by the time children like this have families of their own, they can have hope for the future. If we act now, the countless thousands of dogs that die from rabies each year or are harmed as a result of fear from this terrible disease can lead safe and happy lives as part of our communities. If we act now, these children and millions more around the world could be the final rabies generation. Donate today, and together we can make this the final rabies generation.
Actually, guys, you know what? Anything is possible with a winning team. I always finish up like this because I'd much rather have you actually joining this amazing crew, and it's all thanks to them. You know, I love being a part of this big team doing all these kind of projects, but it's the team that are everything. And what I really would love to say is just come on out on a trip. So if you enjoyed that and you want to come on a trip, you know, you don't need to be a nurse, a vet. You just got to care and want to get stuck in. You come on a rabies project with Mission Rabies. And, you know, just love to have you along. But anyway, thanks very much for your time. And that is me done on the presentation.
Luke, that was completely amazing. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us about all of that. I knew this was going to be completely inspiring. And I'm just trying to bring you up so we can ask you some questions. There you are. I also thought it'd be perfect for our faculty, actually, because we're in the Faculty of Health and Wellbeing at the University of Winchester. We clearly prioritise animal welfare, but we're also very much into human health and wellbeing as well. And that Mission Rabies is obviously the perfect crossover between animal health and wellbeing and real impacts for people in those regions of the world. So very inspiring indeed. We were due to finish about this time, and we do understand if anyone needs to leave. Luke, are you willing to stick around for another 15 minutes or so and take some questions? Because we've got a bunch that have come in.
Yeah, I'm sorry to have witted on a bit there, but I was going to cut out one of those videos and it started. I thought, let's just go with it. I mean, you couldn't see it anyway, but it's a great breather for me. And look, I should say just a massive thanks to you and the team for letting me chat to the Animal Welfare Centre at Winchester. You're a cracking crew, and it's nice to be able to talk to everybody about it. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Luke. So we've had, as I say, half a dozen questions come in. So Alice asks the first one. She says, as a large animal vet, how can we get involved in these projects? And is it always volunteer work, or do you have any opportunities for more permanent paid positions?
Yeah, well, Alice, you know, we do, but they're actually few and far between. So we virtually never advertise, because we do get a lot of people wanting to come and work, and often it's the volunteers. Most of the crew here are actually, they came on trips and they were just absolutely phenomenal, and then we were in touch, and then of course, you know, they ended up joining the team in their skill set. Large animal vets are pretty gold dust though, good ones that like the One Mission, One Health work. So if you are interested and want to get into the stuff, then probably the best thing to do is just join a team, get out there, get stuck in, get to know the crew, and then obviously you're in the loop as to what comes up and when.
And Luke, I presume that for vets that have only got a small animal background, likewise, they would still be useful and welcome, would they, on some of these trips? Yeah,
most of our vets are small animal, actually. So yeah, absolutely, and it'd be super welcome. Certainly experienced vets for the veterinary training. We always have vets who can get out there and help run the courses. They're gold dust, and we really appreciate that help and support. And then the outreach ones, if they've got good experience and they're up for those sort of adventures, then wonderful to have them. You know, it's tough, you know, holidays are few and far between and all that kind of thing, but yeah, we'd absolutely love it. They're often not paid though, those things. They're, you know, we can cover flights sometimes, but generally have to sort of give a bit of time to do it, which is difficult sometimes.
Excellent. Next question was from Miranda, and actually for me really, she was just asking for if there's any more information about the conservation and animal welfare course that we're now setting up in the Centre for Animal Welfare. And I just mentioned that if anyone does have any questions, you can find Dr. Lisa Riley on the university website very easily. She's the program leader and be very happy to advise on that, I think. So we're excited about that new degree that we're setting up. So the next question was from Matilda, and she says, Luke, thanks for presenting and carrying out this incredible work. There's several comments along those lines. It's super inspiring. Do you have any thoughts on effective ways to support education to tackle chronic animal abuse that can happen in very deprived human communities where animals are often neglected for, and she lists a very long list of reasons, which I'll just cut short. She does ask, do you think that engaging videos or presentations given in schools by local people could help, for example?
Yeah, I think it's a really astute point. I think Matilda's absolutely right. You know, moral perception is everything. Education is the big key. It's winning people over. It's not preaching at them about the right way. It's really just trying to explain. So obviously we've reached 3 million children now with the rabies education program going to schools. And a lot of that is about trying to raise the moral perception towards dogs. You know, it's how do you interact with dogs? You know, do you respect dogs? They're not going to bite you. What do you do if a dog comes at you and is barking? You know, simple things. And we can expand that and bolt on other messaging as well. So yeah, the answer is yes. I think it was absolutely right. I think education is huge. And when I first started, I thought education was like handing out a few leaflets. You know, it was so naive and I was so wrong. And this project has really opened my eyes, particularly the rabies project has really opened my eyes about the value and importance of education as a cornerstone to affecting any kind of change.
I'll just note that we work with various partner organisations in the Centre of Animal Welfare, and one of those is the Brook Equine charity that also does a lot of work in the developing world, and they're very they are very involved in working with local people, and rather than, as you say, Luke, coming in and preaching as the outsiders, but engaging those local people in deciding what their priorities are and helping to educate their own community in their own ways, providing the support for them to do that. So yeah, we see that common strategy, I think, across your organisation, others as well that work in those areas, which is great. Emma asks, if we see animals in distress in another country, what would be the first point of contact, a local vet or a charity option?
Well, it's a toughie. If there's a charity option, they'll come out and help. That's great. Everything hangs on donations. If you go to a private vet, you've got to have the responsibility for that animal ongoing, and that's hard. If you're on holiday, it's really difficult because a private vet is going to be faced with a very difficult situation at that moment. I personally think probably an animal charity is your better bet for the long-term welfare and health, because they'll have access to a vet, and with a little donation, they probably really appreciate that, and then they'll support and help in the best way they can.
Excellent. John says, super inspirational. Great to see the fun you had with it all too, which I have to say I'm impressed by as well. Have you, or would you ever consider doing anything to help raise the profile of welfare issues for wild fish and or other aquatic animals?
It's not like it. Yeah, it's important. I love fish. It's not an area of expertise for me. It's the honest truth, John. I mean, every project has to be fun. I think you can have a lot of fun. You have a lot of fun with fish. Obviously, we were trying to get a project going in Mafia Island off the coast of Tanzania, actually, with a big whale shark ecology project there, and trying to help protect the reef. And we've looked at that. It's really, you want to go down to the marine conservation charities for that kind of thing. It's probably a little bit out the remit of certainly, obviously, not fish don't get rabies, so it's not Mission Rabies. And with WVS, the answer is we probably don't have that in-house expertise to get into that particular arena, but we care about it. And if it's a thing we can help with, we would. We do a lot with sea turtles. We try and help with that sort of thing and the fishing of turtles. But yeah, drop us a line more about the wild fish issues that are on your mind, and we'll see if there's anything we can do. But as a vet, it's probably pretty tricky.
Luke, I used to see a lot of sea turtles when I taught at one of the world's largest vet schools in the Caribbean before coming to Winchester, and it was an absolute treat to see those on a regular basis, and not least because 6 out of 7 of them are now endangered around the world. Which regions are you working in with sea turtles, or your teams?
Well, we did some stuff in Carriacou, actually, which probably, Grenada. So we did in Carriacou, we were doing some stuff there, trying to support and help. Low key things, we're not sort of leaders in this arena at all. But if we're in a place and there's animals struggling or suffering, there's an issue we can help with, we will practically and pragmatically help as best we possibly can.
Fantastic. So Grace says thanks for the fascinating talk, and she's been wanting to get involved with WVS and Mission Rabies since beginning her training as a student vet nurse. She's hoping to qualify later this year. Do you have any advice for recently qualified nurses looking to get into this sort of work? So with respect to experience, extra qualifications that might be useful, or things like that. And are there any long-term positions available for registered vet nurses with any of these projects?
So I think vet nurses are actually the backbone of all the projects we run. I mean, they're sort of the organised engine house behind everything, making them work. And the operating of an animal is one aspect, but the aftercare is, just as important in and caring for those animals. And the nurses we have, are just phenomenal on the teams. You know, a good vet nurse is just absolute gold dust on all these projects. So the answer is yes, there's absolutely tons of opportunity to get involved in projects and come on board, and we love your help and support. In terms of getting kind of permanent positions with that nomadic travel, harder, much harder. And I think probably get the balance, you know, volunteer, do a few little trips, get a job, get the experience going, and then build that up through network and contacts. But it's doing a little bit regularly will give you that network of contacts where you can get more into that and sort of get the opportunities. It sounds really fun. Go in on a, you know, oh, spend a couple of years traveling the world saving animals. It is fun for that kind of thing, but actually there's a high burnout rate, and it's never as great when you're doing it relentlessly. It just isn't. The travel can suck. These countries are brilliant in a luxurious position where you're leaving and you're there and you're having a great time. Actually really hard. Many of these projects are utterly exhausting, and it's often just getting that balance and realization of it. So I wouldn't jump into that. I'd test a few out, have those adventures, and then sort of make a decision as you go down the road, and then maybe take a 6 months position somewhere like in Malawi, the BSPCA supporting there. You know, those are often paid positions where you can help a bit, but a fixed time, so you've got an exit, and you know where you're going next, and then you can obviously look at other options further on.
Thanks. That sounds like really good advice. Sam asks, what's the best way as a vet to get involved with the Mission Rabies side of things, and are the projects running currently with the COVID and travel restrictions? Well,
yes, they are running currently. So we've got permanent teams in Malawi and India and Thailand, which is great. So those teams are working non-stop. We managed to get the crew out in January for the project in Tanzania, and we've got one in Uganda in June. Volunteer spaces come up on the Mission Rabies website. We'd love your help. Come on board. Join one of those. They're often sort of 10-day trips, many of them, and you'd be super welcome. It's a good reason, you know, a justifiable reason for travel, because rabies is categorized as a major public health issue, and so the teams all have permits to carry on working, and we work throughout the COVID crisis actually everywhere in our projects. We just couldn't send a lot of international volunteers, but the teams went on solidly throughout with right PPE. It made it all a lot harder, of course, but they did 90,000 dogs last year in Goa, which is pretty impressive, despite a massive state lockdown. So yes, we've got to carry on, otherwise the whole thing will fail. So
excellent. Sounds like one of the few ways to be able to travel around the world these days. Fran is asking, what about the cats in these communities? Do they ever get vaccinated as well?
Yeah, they do, but it fills me with a fear of dread. If you're in a static clinic and so you've got 800 dogs lined up and someone rocks up with a cat in a sack, it is just basically an absolute nightmare. And two aspects of that. One is trying to vaccinate the cat in the sack is hard, because, you know, the cat often will get out the sack and then you've got 800 dogs there, or, you know, cats are not the easiest to hold in these sort of environments, and they're just in some balls of fury. Honestly, I've lived this many times, and it is there's another sack, there's another cat in a sack. We do vaccinate the cats if they turn up, but the focus is very much on the dogs. Although obviously the cats can get rabies. We're trying to do the dogs. 99% of all dog bites cause human rabies cases. So trying to really get people to not bring cats in sacks can be a massive welfare issue if they do.
Do you very often see a cat turn up in a sack surrounded by 500 dogs?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And I've seen the cats get out the sack surrounded by 500 dogs, and that's also horrific.
You've said you do have a very adventurous career out there. It sounds like the sort of adventure you prefer not to have, however.
Best probably not to chat about it on the talk Centre of Animal Welfare.
Fair point. We'll move on. I've got time for, I think, one last question, and we're going to need to draw this to a close. So Georgia, this is a fabulous presentation, super inspiring work. She's in Greece, and especially in Santorini and other islands. There are many donkeys being...
microphone or something. It's gone really like buzzy. Honestly, it's like a robot in a bath.
Okay, can you hear me now all right?
Yeah, much better.
Apologies, my microphone seems to just kind of get tired after about 90 minutes. It happens a lot when I teach as well. And I just plug it back in and all is okay again. So thanks for flagging that up. But Georgia in Greece, it says that in Santorini and other islands, there are many donkeys being neglected, carrying the tourists around. Were you aware of this? How can she boost her community to act for those animals? And that'll be our final question, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the welfare of working at equines is really, really challenging. And I think it's all about trying to raise that moral perception. It's trying to do campaigns about that. It's about having water points for the donkeys that are there. It's making the tourists aware about the welfare of the donkeys more than the people actually necessarily using the donkeys. And that's the power. Those donkeys carrying the tourists depend on the income from the tourists. So it's about educating about that as a sort of fundamental, you know, if you're riding these donkeys, care a bit about that, you know, and setting up simple things like regular water troughs at the point where the tourists get on or off, and probably get donations from that from tourists, and just doing a big campaign about it is the way. Stopping it blanket is almost impossible without sort of big government support. But so it's all about building that community awareness and going head to head with the donkey operators anywhere. So it's all, you've got to work with them. That's the key.
All right, Luke. Well, I'd really like to extend a huge thanks to you. I was slightly exhausted just listening to your presentation, all the amazing array of activities that you're engaged in, but it's an absolutely fabulous showcase, really, of what you and all your teams have been able to do around the welfare and the linkages, as I said, between the importance of that and human welfare as well in so many of those locations, and also how to sometimes have a lot of fun at the same time, demonstrating that the animal welfare career is not all about hard slog and grim, awful situations. It is really important, I think, to keep that balance. You have mentioned burnout as being an issue. It certainly is within veterinary practice as well, and is really important to keep that balance. And obviously, you're a model of how to do that with respect to the adventurous side of it. So a massive thank you for coming to speak to us today. Just to flag up everybody that if you know of other people who would like to see this presentation as well, Luke's kindly said, I hope you're still willing, that we can pop this recording up on our university YouTube channel and the Centre for Animal Welfare YouTube channel. Thanks very much for that, Luke. If people have got any final questions, and a lot of them seem to also be about how people could get involved, and you've answered a lot of that really well, but there were one or two we didn't have time to cover. Is there a way that they should reach out to you?
Yeah, you can email me, luke@wvs.org.uk. Pretty simple. Yeah, nothing tricky about that. So luke@wvs.org.uk. There's lots of information on the websites, WVS and Mission Rabies. We're a fairly simple team, so anyone in the team, just their name and the email address will pretty much get you in touch with them. So we're not precious about that at all. But anyone who cares about this stuff, would love to hear from you. And thanks very much again for all your support, and particularly yours, Andrew, with everything. And really, really great fun. Thanks a million.